platform. So my name is Yazan Ghazawi. I'm the head of film at SA Institute Dubai. It's my pleasure to be moderating today's panel on the challenges of creating and producing feature-length films. So our panel today brings together prominent filmmakers and film industry professionals to examine the challenges of producing feature-length films, including issues relating to equipment management, procurement, financing, as well as copyright laws, as well as the creative process, which we'll be going through in depth. So to help us dive deeper into this discussion, it's my pleasure to introduce to you our panelists for today. So first off, we have Pushpendra Singh, who is an award-winning and critically acclaimed film director and actor. His debut feature, and please excuse my pronunciation, Lajwanti, The Honor Keeper, premiered at the Berlin Film Festival in 2014. Ashwatthama, his second feature, premiered at the Busan International Film Festival in the New Currents competition, and his latest film, Laila Aur Saath Geet, The Shepherdess and the Seven Songs, premiered in the Encounters competition at Berlinale in 2020 and won the NetPack Award at the Jeonju International Film Festival 2020. Lots of festivals. He was awarded the Best Director in the Young Cinema competition at the Hong Kong International Film Festival in 2020 as well. Welcome, Pushpendra.
Thank you. Yeah.
Our second panelist for today is Mohammad Reza Fartousi, who is an independent producer, director, and screenwriter. He's a member of the Iranian Alliance of Motion Picture Guilds and is a disciple of prominent Iranian filmmaker Abbas Kiarostami. His debut feature film, Mother, I Am Joseph, has screened at a number of international film festivals. He is also the founder of Filmival, a film distribution and marketing studio, which is aimed at supporting the regional film industry and remarkable filmmakers from Middle East and North Africa. Welcome, Reza. Reza, right? I don't know if you can hear me. Are you there?
Yeah.
Hi. Okay, and last but not least, we have Mr. Chuko Esiri, an acclaimed Nigerian writer and director. He has a Master in Fine Arts from NYU, where he was a Purple List winner. He then returned to Nigeria and produced Julius Ona's short film Big Man in 2012 as part of Focus Features Africa First program. He went on to make two more short films, Goose in 2017, co-directed with his twin brother Ari, that premiered at the 2017 LA Film Festival, and Besida 2018, an official selection at the 2018 Berlinale. A Mofe, screening at Sharjah Film Platform this year, is his debut feature film. Welcome, Chuko.
Thank you.
All right, so you've all had a multitude of experiences working, I'm sure, with short films prior to attempting your first feature films. How would you describe these experiences, and what do you feel were the most valuable lessons that you learned going forward? So I'm just going to direct this question to Chuko first, if you wouldn't mind sharing.
I think with the short film, I shot a short film here in Abraka, my hometown, my home village, and I just wanted to make the film. So my brother was supposed to produce it and help me make it, but he had another job he was doing. I wasn't willing to delay, so I just went along with it. And on the third day, I learned the lesson that you shouldn't do everything on your own. It was just massively overwhelming, you know, and that was when I learned the value of having a partner or having someone that can help carry the burden. Because my impression was, if I can't do it for a short film, don't even bother trying it with a larger one. But it was really learning what your limitations are as a filmmaker, because there's certain things that I think we're stronger at, or that we gravitate towards, and certain things that we find difficult and hard to manage. And I think my experience with short films was I really learned where I was best placed.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, we kind of push the idea that filmmaking, of course, and I work in education and filmmaking education specifically, that filmmaking is a collaborative art form. And it's not something that you can do on your own as much as you'd like to, as much as the resources limit you. But, you know, working on your own is a big challenge. Pushpendra, could you share your experience working on short films?
No, I haven't directed a short film yet. I began my career as an actor. Of course, there was a short video live in performance which I did I directed also and I shot also. It was a 20-minute, using video, I would narrate a story, and I would do
Right.
Yeah. So, my experience has been that, that respect that you're working within constraints, because as independent filmmakers, you always work within constraints. So to respect that and use that as a creative stimulus to do whatever you want to do.
To get creative.
Yeah. And
absolutely.
I think it really, if you're open to accepting that you're working within constraints, you get more creative, because within those limited resources, then you plan your, like short breakdown, your production, your crew, your cast, etc. Because, like in all my 4 feature films, I only have like maybe 1 or 2 professional actors. Others are like real people from the spaces where I shoot my films, and I involve them in production, even like, in changing my script writing, because it's very authentic. It comes from them, So yeah, that has been a big lesson for me.
Yeah, and a valuable lesson, absolutely, as well. Reza, would you mind sharing your experience with us?
Really, I think the short film is the best way to enter the industry of professional cinema. And the cheapest way or better way to learn the cinema is making a film. And because I think the short film especially give me a big opportunity to make a different movie, because you don't have a big finance, and also you don't have a really audience in short film. Usually when you don't have any big audience, you have a more freedom to make new things, to experience new way to tell a story, new way to find a read, or new way to shooting. Because that, I think, for me is good to work with limitation in finance, limitation in crew, limitation in audience, limitation in everything. But generally, it's very useful for me, and I think it's useful for everybody make short film and try to turn his or her ideas to pictures.
Yeah, absolutely. It's certainly a very very essential part, I would say, of of a filmmaker's process to just kind of hone their ideas. It's a step before a step, as they say. So moving the focus on now to feature films. Pushpendra, you mentioned you've worked on directed a number of feature films, and I'm sure you'll relate to the fact that a feature film, it becomes your entire life essentially for the better part of 1 or 2 years. But it starts off often with an elongated period of development, of developing the script, of developing your idea. So could you share with us your experience in developing and molding a feature-length story, in gearing it towards production?
So what I do is, all my stories, they are very rural-centric. They're not urban-centric. And they're set in remote corners of India, basically, because all my focus on the marginalized class. So then what I do is, I go to those locations and I spend a lot of time on finding the right locations. Right locations meaning which are controllable. Because I work in an independent scenario, it's not big budget. So, and also in these remote corners, what happens is usually they are on the borders. So there are security, defense issues, so you cannot get permissions to shoot. So, going there, finding the right location where, you can take people into confidence, they're ready to help you. And then, understanding the realities of the space, and then, adapt the script according to that. So
So for you, do you like find the story? So you already have an idea in your head of kind of the topic that you want to talk about, and then you go and find it. It's almost like a documentary, right?
Yeah. My films are basically, they lie between documentary and fiction.
Right.
But yeah, usually 2 of my features are folk tales. So,
right.
adaptations of folk tales.
So I would imagine the development of this, folktale, as you mentioned, what's the process of developing something like that?
Number one is, I want to make them contemporary. So, that's why it will speak to the audiences right now, So then, I look at, and you look at folk tales, they'll speak to you every time, that's the quality of a good folk tale. Even if they are like 100 years old, like 1,000 years old, they resonate even now. So what are these qualities which resonate even now? I just pick on them and then I adapt to current realities. That's how I work. Yeah.
Okay, Chuko, I'll move this to you. Your feature film is going to be screening at the film platform this year. Could you tell us, your experience in the development phase and how you found your story and the process that you kind of followed?
I had the idea for the film maybe about 8 years before actually shooting it, and over that time, the idea, obviously, it evolves and it changes, and you get a better sense of. I think what it is there's a feeling of what it is you want to say. There's a sense of, you see something and you want to say something about it, but you don't quite know immediately what it is you're honing in on. So it needed that time to get to the point where it was clear what it was.
Sorry to cut you off. I always liken it to almost like a stew that's cooking very, very slowly.
Yeah.
Right? On the oven. Yeah,
exactly.
on the hob. Yeah.
My twin brother who's on the other side of the ocean would be very happy with that analogy.
Okay.
But much like Pushpendra, I spent about a year before we managed to get the financing. I spent a year looking at locations and getting to know, getting very familiar with the various neighborhoods and the people there. And I shot in the city and in Lagos, which is a madhouse, 20 million people, everything moving at 100 miles an hour. So accepting that you cannot control it, my brother and I, we built the visual language of the film to incorporate life going on in the background. So we were not going to stop what was happening around us. We were just going to focus it on our characters and on the sea within the larger sea, which was the city, which is moving 24 hours, 365. So it was very much that. It was going around, finding locations, getting familiar with the people in the locations as well, because you're going to show up with a small army of about 70 people or so when you take in everybody in the crew. But yeah, very welcoming. I think part of in Nigeria, certainly I can speak that historically there's been difficulty with foreign filmmakers coming to shoot here. By foreign, I specifically mean Europeans, because there's a feeling that they're coming to exploit. They find the slums, they find the extreme areas, and they sort of helicopter in and helicopter out, and the people sort of never really feel like they participated or like they were welcome. They just like a museum pieces. So it was something I was very conscious of, and I really wanted people in the areas we shot in to feel like they were part of something, and wherever we could, we engaged them. We needed mosquito nets to be made for a scene. We asked around, does anybody here know how to sew, that kind of thing, and just to make it as communal experience as possible. And but having spent so much time visiting and seeing, at one point they were like, "Are you sure you're making this movie? You've been coming here for like 6 months. You say you're making a movie, we haven't seen anything." It's like, "Oh no, we're coming. But it was very much that. It's like, have the idea, have the look, have the setting, and then I call it field research. I just went out and tried to learn and tried to see and tried to take it as much as possible, but also be very flexible. Like, the script is a guideline. feel free. We were like, feel free to change words. Feel free to, if you want to shoot it in this location, it doesn't quite work. This one is what's available. Then move it there. It doesn't really. Every day is fluid. So that was
same
that.
with me,
Yeah.
No, I'm just relating what you said, Chuko, to what Pushpendra was talking about earlier about, maybe the location really kind of plays a role, the setting plays a role in your development process. So the field research, as you were saying, is like a big part of it, and both of you, have done something similar. So Reza, I'll move this to you. Could you share your experience? Did you experience something similar?
Yeah, for me, the development stage is one of the difficult stage for me, because as my background in documentary filmmaking, I try to find an idea from what's happened around me, and especially from the true event. But because I live in Iran and my story was in Iraq, I faced the problem to find a good resource and find a location and many things like that, because I'm I live in Tehran, and it's for me was very difficult to travel to Baghdad, to south of Iraq and come back to Iran. I spent many of my time to find a location and find details from the living in Iraq, especially my story and my film. It's happened in the past, in about 2003, and I tried to find the customs and other things in that time in Iraq, because that is for me was very difficult to developing this stage. But I got help from the professional people and also from local people to help me to develop the scenario and write a good script to turn it to the movies.
Yeah, so once again, the development process takes place almost in the location, just to kind of make it authentic, just to kind of be able to almost make it one and the same with your story, with your script, with what you're writing. And that's really, really interesting. I think also, and I'll move on to the next question, because we kind of segue. So from an independent perspective, do you feel, and I pose this question to Chuko, if I could start with you, do you feel that the audience appeal is something that you take into consideration when creating your content? And I ask this because, as independent filmmakers, or as filmmakers generally, regardless of, whether you're an independent or not, I feel like, sometimes there's this constant quandary in your head of what kind of, film you're going to make, and that depends also on the kind of funding that you get, and funding is something that we'll touch upon later. But would you say that, again, I know that you're not going to be making a commercial film in the strictest sense of the word, but do you feel like you want, like, how much of an extent of importance, let's say, do you feel audience appeal is something that you take into consideration when making your content?
I think as someone who considers himself a storyteller, I consider it greatly, in the sense that I would like my story to make sense to the people.
You want people to see it, right? You want people to see it, people to enjoy and engage.
But audience appeal, I think audience appeal and will I get a lot of people to see it is not something I think about. I only think about it to the extent that I want people to be able to watch the film and feel like they've been transported somewhere, and be involved with the characters and follow the story. I think that's the beauty of cinema, and I think independent cinema specifically, because more than commercial cinema, it really gives you opportunity to fall into something very specific. And I think the more you watch movies from around the world, the more you realize that the specific can be universal. You know, some of my favorite films are from, you know, from Iran. I'm a massive fan of Kiarostami, and I came to Iranian very late, very, very late. I remember I was supposed to be in class, but I went to go and watch A Separation instead whilst I was at law school. And that was my first time ever seeing the country, Iran, that, you know, in context other than the news. And it was really remarkable. And I saw so many things that I recognized and were familiar to me from my culture and my people. And I think to answer the question, I think audience appeal, I think it comes if you're being sincere and honest about the story you're telling. Then somebody across the world, halfway across the world, will be able to feel and move and emote with, connect with the story. So
yeah,
I
absolutely.
think about it. I think about it to the extent that I, you know, is my story authentic? Am I, as a storyteller, being sincere? And when people see it, will they feel like they've come to a small corner of the world that maybe they've never been to before?
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. I think authenticity really has a lot to do with it, and that relates to what you were talking about earlier about the research period, you know, the field research that you referred to in development. Reza, what are your thoughts on this? How do you feel, you know, that you take into consideration audience appeal?
Yeah, I think in the beginning, no one know you, and you also do not know who your audience is, and it's a problem because in the other hand, you have a problem you must compete with films with big quality and who made it in a big studio. Indie filmmaker cannot match or reach the same level of production quality and value from the big film studio. The big film production studio always have the advantage of budget, cast, equipment, marketing, production. But you as an independent filmmaker couldn't find it easy, and you must make everything in a small budget or micro budget, and after the making the film and when you think the film is finished, but the story is start because you don't have audience, you don't have a way to screen or distribute your film, because no cinema owner want to screen your film because you don't have celebrities, famous actors. And I think this is a big challenge, especially for me. In my case, it's a big challenge because when I finished my film, I tried to find the distributor. I tried to find the audience. And especially in Middle East, we have a big problem to screen indie film, because most of the cinema theater screen the Hollywood film or big production Arabic movies. Also in Iran, the same. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I think this is, you know, it's something that I know that in the Middle East, you know, having worked for exhibitors, I understand that, of course, independent cinema, you know, there's a growing space for these films. Certainly it's better today than it was, you know, 10, 20 years ago, you know, with the advent of independent cinemas and, you know, a number of different festivals. But I would say, I think, I want to touch upon the point of competition that you mentioned, and I want to reframe this question to Pushpendra. I think in your part of the world, you know, do you feel that you have to compete with commercial films? Is it difficult for you to be able to you know, get a space for your film and a space for your voice to be heard?
You know, in my part of the world, you cannot compete with the big films.
No, of course not.
Yeah, Bollywood is the largest film producing industry, you know, combined with all the commercial industries in different regions of India, because we have a very diverse commercial industry in every region of India. So you have Tamil cinema, you have Telugu cinema, you have Kannada cinema, you have Bollywood, which is centered in Bombay, but caters to large part of India, which is very Hindi speaking. So yeah, one cannot compete with them. And they, they appeal to this crude, idea of pop to the large masses, so we have a system of song and dances and action and masala, So yeah, you can never, and if you try to compete, you'll only go bad,
So what I would say is, I mean, sure, of course, I mean, maybe you can't compete in a commercial sense or, in a viewership sense, let's say. But how do you find a space for your film? Like, how do you find a space for your story that you want to tell?
I think it's related to the previous question which you asked, that whether you care about the audiences or not. In India, there's a long tradition of arts and aesthetics, which is like thousands of years old. And there's an interesting term which I like very much. In Indian arts and aesthetics, it's called sahridayi, which means of the same taste and of same liking. So it says that audiences are not homogeneous, that you cannot say that everyone is like that. There are different tastes, So they say that whatever artwork you make it for your sahridais, people who are of the same taste, who like your taste, So I feel because when I started my first film, I never knew that who would be my audience, and I did not even care about who would be my audience. Slowly people, start finding out. People of the same taste, they come to you, they discover. And then, that relationship is built slowly over the years. It's not easy in the beginning, but slowly, it's happening. And also film festivals are playing a huge role, in curating diverse kinds of films. And so people come there, and then they discover films. And then, a relationship is built over a period of time. I know it's not so easy, and I don't, because as a filmmaker, if I start worrying about, okay, who are my audiences, should I make it for them? Then, I think you are taking one more trouble on yourself.
Yeah.
Other than that, I'll focus on the kind of stories I want to tell and let audiences discover. So
that's a constant challenge, I would say. Absolutely, for a filmmaker of any kind of pursuing any kind of story, any kind of genre or style. I'd like to take a step towards the more industrial aspect of filmmaking now, and specifically towards a relationship between a director and producer, which of course is essential and necessary, and often fractious in filmmaking. And independent filmmaking, of course, the lines of responsibility, blur because budgets are smaller, and as a director, and you're often also the writer, and so you take more ownership of your film. You're often an executive producer as well. So I'd just like you guys to share, and I'll start with you, Pushpendra. If you could share your experiences working as part of this duo with a producer. What was your experience in this regard?
It's been pretty good for me. Also because on all my films, I am also one of the main producers.
Right. Okay. Is this from a funding perspective or so what kind of producer are you?
I invest also, and then also
right, okay.
I take care of the production also, because it's low budget. I don't want to add more manpower to it.
Yeah.
So then it's I take charge then as that also. So one of my co-producers is my sound designer also. So
really, wow, okay, that's amazing.
Yeah. And then one is Asai Hriday. He saw my first film at a film market, and then he said, "No, I want to join. I want to come as a producer. I want to invest money in your films." So he's joined. Yeah, and then on my third feature, which was a hybrid documentary, I found a Korean co-producer.
Oh wow, okay.
Yeah, because the documentary got a grant from Busan, and then my fiction also got the ACF post-production grant. So then, she was there in the same mentorship group. So, and then I was going to Korea again and again. So we became friends, and then I was insisting that she also join as a co-producer on, and then she also. So, but I have a relationship where I want my producers to be my friends also, because I have worked on commercial films as I've assisted, especially Indo-European co-productions. And I've seen those challenges with director, getting affected, and there are these tensions. So I want to avoid that into my films, So of course, there are challenges because, they also expect certain things from your film, and then they also want to push. And also because they're not professional producers, it really becomes a challenge.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because you want to assign roles, like, okay, you take this responsibility, you take this, and then, they cannot do it like fully satisfactorily, So then it becomes a challenge. But of course, you have to accept challenges and mold and work. And I always keep saying one very important thing that, because we are not from commercial side, it's like, I consider myself as a worker who lives in slums, and in slums, there are challenges, there are water problems, there are these issues, and you always fight with each other and you're more aggressive. But then in the end, you have to respect that, you have to understand that, after this, let's forget and bury the differences and let's come together.
Yeah, that's an interesting. That's interesting that you also view them as your friends in order to avoid that kind of fractious relationship. Reza, can you relate to this?
I think finding a producer is also one of the most difficult stage for a new filmmaker, especially when you want to make your first feature film. You have a big problem to find a good producer who trusts you, trusts in your skill, and accept the challenging work with a new filmmaker. And in my case, we have a problem because our producer lived in Kuwait and I lived in Tehran, and our story is in Iraq. We have many problem to match things for developing, but we skip this stage. I think for indie filmmaker, we need a producer who starts from the idea with you, because most of the producer
from inception, from the very beginning.
Most of the producer added to project from the production stage, because you need to, when you want to develop an idea and develop the scenario and finding a location and most of that, because it's the first part of the filmmaking is most important, and we need a producer who have a good experience to work with indie filmmaker, because some of the producers have a good experience, but usually they work with the professional people and didn't work with the indie filmmaker or especially new filmmaker. When you come from the short films or from the documentaries and want to make a feature fiction film, and that's the problem is start.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I think that it's always a challenge to find that somebody who's on your wavelength. And Chuko, I'm sure you have an interesting experience to share. I don't know if you worked with a local producer or what your dynamic was like. Could you share with us?
Well, we had like Pushpendra, I was one of the producers on the film. So there were three of us. It was myself, my twin brother, Ari, and a woman called Melissa Dermo, who's Nigerian American. So she, although based in America, I met her out in New York. She was at the business school at NYU, and I was at the film school. And she had very much the same goals and objectives for making an indie film in Nigeria. We have what's called Nollywood here, which is behind Bollywood in production, but it's the same deal. It's like they make one type of film over and over again. They just change the coloring a little bit, and it's very difficult to compete with them or to state that you're trying to do something new. So we were all aligned in that respect. We were all first timers, so it was kind of like Reza's touched upon, like first time trying to produce a feature when none of us really knew what we were doing in a certain respect. We were just sort of putting it together as we were going along, and it wasn't until post-production that one of my professors sort of, he didn't officially come on the film, but he was like a godfather type and could give advice on what to do and where to go and things to consider. And I kind of wish that we had thought of having somebody like that as a mentor for
provide
production.
like a level head, yeah.
Yeah, but you know, obviously, as Reza said, experienced producers are busy and taking on these people that have never made a feature film before in a difficult environment. It's not a attractive proposition, but I think if I could do it again, I would reach out to a few of them and say, hey, we're doing this thing. All I would like is just like, if I could maybe get on the phone with you or email you, just to give me a little bit of guidance, things to consider, things to look out for. But finding a producer is extremely difficult, and I think respecting your producer is very, very important, because, or having mutual respect for each other, because it's going to be difficult, it's going to be fractious, particularly as first timers. Nothing is ever going to go the way you think it's going to go, yeah. And there are going to be very dark days when you feel like, oh my gosh, this is madness. What have I done? To be able to put that aside when you get through the issue and come together is really important. My producer, myself and Melissa, we joked that we were like a married couple that stays together for the children, with the film being the children. So you just, whatever personal issues or problems you have, it's like, that's not important. This is what's important. Let's come together. Let's sort it out. And what you find is, by the time you're done and it's kind of getting to premiere stage or whatever, there's this great gratitude you have that somebody stuck with you throughout all the issues and all the problems. And it's very messy. Independent filmmaking, it's tough on you mentally, physically, it's straining, and it comes at you in ways you don't expect, the stress. And I think knowing that you're not the only one going through it, and there are other people as invested in you to see you through that, to walk by your side at the very least, is very important. So I think if you can find a producer that you respect, a producer that's going to fight you as well, who wants a yes person, a yes man or yes woman, you want someone that's going to make you justify and push your decisions, because there's limitations. So if you say, I want to shoot here and there's only enough budget for this thing, it's, you have to be able to make a truly compelling case that this is what is best for the film. And I think that's part of it as well, having people that'll challenge you and really make you think and ensure your ideas are valid and important.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's important, to engage this person, and they're also, like you said, they're an integral part of the process, especially as Reza mentioned, if there's somebody who's been there from the very beginning, they're as invested as you are. And I'd like to stay with you, Chuko, just to ask you about funding, which is a constant challenge for everybody.
Yeah.
It's the most painful, the painful thing. It's difficult. It's it's few and far between. But specifically, funding agencies often will have, I wrote covert or overt agendas, be they political or social, but beyond it being an actual political agenda or anything like that. But very often funding agencies want to see a specific type of film, or want to fund a specific type of film or a specific type of project. And this kind of relates to what I was asking earlier, but would you say this affects your creative process? So, you know, I'm just trying to tie together these different elements, you know, of what it means to succeed as a filmmaker today. So, you know, how much of yourself would you say, and your story, would you have to sacrifice in order to get funding, in order to get funding for your story?
We were very fortunate in that our primary financiers also had the same objective. I always say that you have to be ready to receive your good luck. So in terms of, because you never know who and when that check is going to be signed. So all you can do is be as prepared as possible for whenever you're in the room with that person that's going to say the one yes you need to get everything rolling. But in terms of sacrificing story, it's it's kind of like applying for grants, I think. You know, it's like when you have a pair of jeans that are too small for you. You sort of squeeze in, you know, you suck your belly in, you do what you have to do, you just to make sure that to get the thing on. And it's really that. I think no matter what your idea is or what your story is, in terms of dealing with funders, it's about presenting what is palatable to them. And I think that in itself is a different skill, sort of salesmanship. So I don't think at the initial phase anyway, sacrificing and changing the story, I don't think you should do it, because you're not making the film you want to make anymore. So why
absolutely.
Why embark on find another way? It just means that this is not the way you should do it. It means you're going to have to find another way. But fundamentally, I think if you can sell your vision, your project, your passion, then you're about 2/3 of the way there. I think independent filmmakers, I don't think anyone that's putting their hand in their pocket is really doing it because they think they're going to get a big return. I think it's, whether consciously or subconsciously, part of it is investing in you, the individual. And I think if you can present yourself as someone worth investing in, then you'll find people that are willing to take the journey with you. And that was the experience we had. We had a couple of people, they didn't invest much, but it always makes the next person feel comfortable when you can say, oh, you know, we already had 6 investors and so on and so forth, and that kind of thing. But no, I wouldn't be willing to sacrifice or change the story in order to get money to make it. It just means you have to try to find another way.
It's a challenge. It really is. And I think it also depends, like for me, for example, you know, I'm interested primarily in comedy, and it's so rare for comedy to get any kind of funding because people are not interested, you know, in funding comedy. And I have a friend of mine who's a documentary filmmaker who made a feature documentary, and when she came to sell it to an American distributor, the American distributor says, we kind of don't like the ending. So could you please change the ending to something more hopeful and we'll pick it up. And, you know, she was just like completely dumbfounded, but this is the way that it happens sometimes. And you have to make that fundamental choice. And I'll move on to Reza. Thank you, Chuko, for your answer. What's your experience, Reza, with funding in the Middle East? I'm sure it's a big challenge, obviously.
Really, the relation between funding and creativity is not good in the most of the time. But I think you as a filmmaker, you must have an idea how to work with the funding, because as you say, this story, it's happened for me, especially for my documentary films, for my documentaries. Most of the European and even the American distributor want to change something in the final version of my documentaries, but really I didn't accept it, because I have an idea and want to picture it to say something, and try to find another way for screening or for finding my film. I know it's very difficult. I know you need to wear iron shoes, or in this time you need an iron finger for email and find. Yeah, but also you have many problems to find a good fund agency or institute, because every fund institute have their special rules, and some give you a fund instead of you shooting in this country location, or you must use, for example, editor from that country. But I think you as an indie filmmaker must make what you want and try to be independent. This is, for me, it's very, very, very important.
Yeah, absolutely. But again, you know, it's especially in this climate now, and for the past few years, you know, funding has become a lot more difficult to find. And so it's this consistent struggle, as you mentioned. And I'll ask you, Pushpendra, as well, what the funding climate is for you in for you in India, you know, to fund an independent film there, and how much of a challenge is that?
Yeah, it's very challenging. It's not easy at all. Also because we have this tradition of commercial films, so you know, this whole idea of making money with films is there, and the kind of films which we make, you know, they don't make money. So yeah, it's very challenging. So, but there are some, you know, you have to find some private investors who like your work, or like who also like want to promote arts. So, you know, like looking for them, and also you know, all these markets are playing a very huge role. For example, there is this Asian project market, Busan. There's Hong Kong Film Mart. For Asians, you know, so separately for like Arab countries, you know, we have Sharjah, we have Doha.
Yeah.
So, you know, we have Cairo. So I think these platforms are very important. So as filmmakers, you know, it's better to do research and then, you know, like target where it's good for you, because it's very competitive. You know? So what I realized is, you know, either, you know, like with script, I applied to Hubert Walls, Rotterdam. I haven't got it through yet. But then I realized there are these Asian platforms where I can go, and there it has really helped me, you know, especially with post-production or like small money. But then what it does, it adds value to your project. And then private investors sometimes becomes a little easy. So that has happened on my 3 films, not on my first film, but on the other 3 films, you know, after that. So I'm from Korea, Hong Kong, and then, you know, this post-production grading we did in Bangkok for the new film, you know, because we got this post-production award at Hong Kong Film Mart. So, yeah, I think you have to be very innovative and creative.
Sure. Especially working with limited funding. Yeah, and I'll stay with you actually, Pushpendra, for our final question. I mean, our hour has almost flown by. So just to ask you to wrap up, what would you say your biggest challenge, the single biggest challenge that you faced as an independent filmmaker making a feature film, specifically a feature film?
Funding.
Funding. Okay, so I hit the nail on the head.
Yeah. No, that's the biggest challenge, because I want to expand my aesthetic also, you know, in my filmmaking, but you're so constrained by funds that, you know, like, okay, you can't get the right, cast, if you imagine, or for example, equipments, you know, the right kind of camera or lenses. For example, I like movement in my films a lot, you know. So you you cannot afford a dolly or a crane. So then you need to adapt your story, your aesthetics, your form to the constraints, of production. So it's a very big challenge.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then you can't pay your crew.
Sorry.
Like your crew is working for bare minimum. And even on my fourth film, even if I have to worry, then I realize that it's the same struggle which I'm continuing for my first film. It's still continuing.
It's a constant struggle.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Chuko, would you like to weigh in?
I think as an independent filmmaker, funding will always be an issue. Just to add to what Pushpendra said in the last question, with value added to projects from agencies giving their stamp. There's also, I think, when my screenplay won the Purple List Award, which is a grad film competition, and that went a long way in making the investors feel comfortable. So I also think, submitting your screenplay to these various screenwriting challenges and the rest of it, the competitions or whatever, it's not overly expensive, $10, $15 for some of the applications. But I think that's a place where early on, if you're going to investors, you can say, well, look, all these people have already said this, the script is great. So that's something as well to consider when going out to funding. For me, my personal experience with the challenge has been distribution. And it's been very interesting because specifically as an African filmmaker, it's a very unseen, unknown market, and it's very strange to be in a room speaking with sales agents and distributors, and the truth is, you, the filmmaker, know more about how to reach your people than they do. And even when you let them know, hey, look, there is a market for this. You've got millions of Nigerians living in this city. I could tell you where they are directly. They're still very uncomfortable because it hasn't been done before, and because no one has done it. So it was that I learned that, ironically, we're in a very risk-averse business, and so personally, a big challenge has been getting people to buy into the film as something that should be that can be shown to a general audience.
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely distribution is a consistent challenge, I would say. Second to funding.
Because I don't worry about distribution because for me, I accepted that I won't get distribution.
I'll do that on the next film.
So Reza, I'll pass this question to you. Your biggest challenge?
Yeah, I think when I was trying to develop scenario, I thought it's the most biggest challenge I've had. And after that, when I try to find money, I think that's the biggest challenge.
Yeah.
But when I start the project and shooting, I don't know, that's the biggest challenge and most difficult thing. And when you have a film on your table, or nowadays on your link or on Vimeo, you say like Chuko, the distribution is the most challenging stage when you have. I think when you are when you are young, or you don't have a good relation in industry of the cinema, most of the stage is a big challenge, and you must solve it and jump to another stage.
What is this industry, guys? It's torture. Why are we in it? What's going on?
Can I add something?
Yes, please go ahead.
you know, at such forums, I always like to add this, that, you know, I agree with Chuko that, you know, most of the distributors, you know, they don't know the potential. They don't want to do research. They, you know, always walk the same path which others are following. I see a potential, I see of distributing, but for that, I think there has to be a big network, or maybe some or a platform who can come together, because, you know, I know there are small pockets of people who like to watch independent films in India. You know, similarly, like Chuko knows, Mohammad knows, you know, as a platform in Sharjah, etc. Film festivals are playing a role. But post film festivals, I think someone needs to come and create a large network. For example, I know in Pune, there is this film archive, you know, where, you know, like films can be arranged. Maybe just one screening or two screenings, maybe a small money would come. But imagine if there are thousands of spaces like this which open up, a small pool of money, you know, like can, you know, it's like the crow and the stone story, you know, the water.
Yeah.
Feeling. And it can really add up, I really feel. But it's just like, you know, there's connection and networking and connecting. And once, you know, this distribution problem is solved, then I think funding will also come, you know, slowly.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I agree. And that's really a perfect way to wrap up our conversation in a hopeful and positive way, as was suggested to my friend who was negotiating with the distributor. It was a real pleasure to talk to the three of you. Thank you so much for taking the time to participate with us. For those of you who are watching at home, thank you so much for sticking around, and please continue to watch the rest of our talks as part of the 3rd edition of the Sharjah Film Platform. Please make sure you check out the films as well on the website. Thank you so much, guys. Have a lovely day, and it's a pleasure to meet you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Absolute pleasure.
Bye-bye.
Bye.